At the G7 summit, European leaders are pushing back against U.S. trade policies and controversial proposals. Behind the diplomatic language, what message is Europe truly sending to Washington? Since early 2025, trade relations between the U.S. and Canada have grown tense after former President Donald Trump proposed new tariffs, 25% on goods and 10% on energy imports from Canada, to protect U.S. industries. In response, Canada imposed reciprocal tariffs and launched a nationwide Buy Canadian campaign to encourage domestic consumption. Labor unions and local manufacturers voiced concerns over potential job losses, especially in the steel and aluminum sectors. At the G7 summit in Alberta, both countries expressed a willingness to engage in dialogue. However, disagreements remain over key areas such as lumber, dairy, and revisions to the USMCA trade agreement. Higher tariffs could raise the cost of cross-border goods, tightening household budgets. Canadian manufacturers risk losing export orders, while U.S. small businesses could face rising input costs due to higher prices on Canadian materials. During a visit to Greenland on June 15th, French President Emmanuel Macron declared, "Greenland is not for sale," a pointed reference to Donald Trump's past suggestion that the U.S. acquire the territory. Macron's statement underscored European unity and a firm stance on sovereignty and territorial integrity. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa emphasized at the G7 that now is not the time for protectionism. Costa warned of the destabilizing impact of unilateral tariffs, while von der Leyen described such measures as a burden for businesses and families. Tariffs between the EU and the US have reached up to 50% on steel and aluminum and 25% on automobiles, demonstrating the complexity of ongoing negotiations. European consumers are beginning to feel the pressure as import tariffs drive up prices on vehicles, electronics, and pharmaceuticals. Small and medium-sized enterprises are especially vulnerable, as higher input costs and reduced export access disrupt business planning. Throughout the summit, European leaders took a more vocal stance against recent shifts in U.S. trade and foreign policy. On June 14th in Greenland, President Macron stated, "No ally should seek to claim the territory of another," a thinly veiled response to earlier U.S. intentions regarding Greenland. Von der Leyen echoed the concern, warning that rising tariffs and trade barriers are increasing the economic strain on households and undermining global cooperation. Europe supports fair trade, not retaliation, she stressed. Council President Costa urged G7 nations to uphold a rules-based trade order and avoid unilateral actions that could disrupt supply chains. European leaders also reaffirmed their global commitments, including nearly 150 billion euros in aid to Ukraine, demonstrating a continued investment in international stability and shared values. Canada has just signed its largest trade agreement of the decade with Indonesia, marking a strategic shift away from its reliance on the United States following escalating tariff tensions. Could this signal a turning point that leaves the U.S. increasingly reactive in its own economic backyard? Following the Trump administration's decision to raise import tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum to 50%, along with the looming threat of a 25% tariff on automobiles, Canada has responded not just politically, but with a clear strategic shift in its national economic direction. The Canadian government has openly declared that the former bilateral trade framework with the U.S. is no longer viable, paving the way for more independent trade strategies. As part of this foreign policy reset, Canada has moved quickly to engage with emerging economies, most notably by signing the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement with Indonesia, a nation of 280 million people. The deal eliminates approximately 90% of tariffs between the two countries and broadens cooperation in key sectors such as energy, mining, and particularly strategic minerals like nickel, an essential input in EVB battery production. For Canadian citizens, this diversification of trade partnerships is expected to bring more stable consumer prices and generate new employment opportunities in the energy and mineral industries. In an increasingly uncertain global trade environment, Canada is emerging as a safe haven for international investors. Thanks to its political stability, transparent legal system, and consistent, predictable trade policies. This stands in stark contrast to developments in the United States, where abrupt tariff changes have raised serious concerns in the business community. According to the latest data released by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, Canada attracted $50.3 billion in foreign direct investment in 2023, representing a 9% increase over 2022. As a result, Canada has joined the ranks of the world's most attractive destinations for FDI. By comparison, FDI into the United States fell by 28% in the same year, down to $148.8 billion, as businesses expressed concern over tariff policies and an increasingly uncertain business environment. This surge in investment not only supports economic growth in Canada, but also contributes to job creation, particularly in industries such as steel, technology, and automotive manufacturing. U.S. tariff policies are not only straining bilateral trade relations, but also creating widespread disruptions in supply chains and domestic consumer markets. The cost of imported vehicles is expected to rise by several $1,000s, prompting manufacturers like Ferrari and Honda to reconsider their business strategies. Faced with steep U.S. tariffs, Canadian companies may respond by raising prices on goods exported to the United States or by cutting back on cross-border contracts, potentially disrupting operations at American manufacturing plants. This could reduce corporate profits, trigger layoffs, and raise prices for American consumers. Additionally, international investors are beginning to reallocate capital away from the United States toward markets such as Canada, Europe, and Asia to hedge against policy risk. This shift could have long-term implications for U.S. economic growth and employment. President Trump's latest tariff measures have sent shockwaves through the tech sector, forcing major corporations such as Amazon, Apple, Ford, and GM to reconsider their strategic direction. Could a corporate exodus from the United States become a reality? Amazon is reportedly exploring the possibility of relocating its global headquarters outside the United States, with the United Arab Emirates emerging as a serious contender. The primary reason is a new tax policy under President Trump, which imposes a 145% tariff on Chinese goods and additional tariffs ranging from 10% to 50% on nearly all imports, including iPhones, European automobiles, and consumer goods. Additionally, large corporations are now required to manufacture domestically to avoid penalties, creating immense pressure on firms with globally integrated supply chains. Establishing new infrastructure and production facilities within the U.S. is not a quick or simple task, especially for companies of Amazon's scale. Should Amazon proceed with relocating its headquarters, it would mark a major blow to the American tech industry and could prompt other companies to follow suit, directly impacting federal tax revenues and employment levels. Amazon Haul, the platform known for offering affordable foreign products, collapsed just days after a tax loophole was closed. Estimates indicate that inbound shipments from China fell by over 80%, leading to widespread inventory shortages and the suspension of many automated orders. Analysts warn that American consumers will begin to feel the effects by summer 2025 as import and logistics costs surge. Delivery times are also expected to lengthen due to increased inspection procedures and steeper tariffs. For American consumers accustomed to low prices and fast shipping, the impact will be tangible. Popular products could see price hikes of 15 to 30% as early as the third quarter of 2025. In a surprising turn, President Trump personally called Jeff Bezos to demand the removal of Amazon's feature displaying tax breakdowns on individual product listings. Amazon stated the feature was designed to provide pricing transparency for consumers. However, the administration argued it would damage the image of the new tax policy and accused the company of politicizing commerce. The exchange has sparked debate across the tech and e-commerce sectors over the boundary between transparency and political messaging. Restricting such information may deprive consumers of the right to understand why prices are rising, while potentially undermining trust in major commerce platforms such as Amazon. President Trump has threatened Apple with a 25% tariff if the company continues manufacturing iPhones overseas. Ford has raised prices on vehicles produced in Mexico by USD 2,000, while GM has suspended operations at several plants, consequences of new tariff policies that are now costing companies billions of dollars. Amazon, meanwhile, has launched new distribution centers in South Asia and Latin America, signaling a steady relocation of its supply chain away from the United States. As a result, America's share in the global supply chain is shrinking at an accelerated pace. The departure of major corporations from the U.S. could lead to job losses and reduced income for American workers. In addition, consumers are likely to face higher prices and increasing product shortages. U.S. ports and businesses face unprecedented disruptions tied to major supply chain breakdowns and tariff hikes. What happens when America's busiest ports go quiet and prices surge at the same time? In May 2025, U.S. container imports dropped sharply, totaling 2.18 million TEUs, a 7.2% year-over-year decline, the steepest fall since March 2020. West Coast ports saw even sharper hits. Long Beach imports slipped 22.4%, and Los Angeles fell 18.4% compared to April. China origin volumes plunged 31.6% in Long Beach and 29.9% in Los Angeles. Economic fallout has been swift. Nearly half of dockworker job orders vanished in recent weeks. The Port of LA recorded a 25% shortfall in cargo handling, and idle dock workers nearly doubled. American workers on docks, drivers, and warehouse staff face job loss or reduced hours, putting rent, tuition, and family incomes at risk. Small businesses near ports, cafes, convenience stores lose foot traffic, further squeezing local communities. A 125% tariff on Chinese imports, imposed April 9th, has raised the U.S. average effective tariff rate to approximately 17.8%, the highest since 1934. The budget watchdog Yale's Budget Lab estimates U.S. households will pay roughly $3,800 more annually due to these tariffs. The OECD forecast suggests inflation could run 0.4 percentage points higher in 2025 and 2026 under current tariff policy. Higher costs for electronics, furniture, clothing, and daily goods are hitting especially low- and middle-income families hard. With nearly $3.8K added to annual expenses, consumers are forced to cut back on spending, impacting discretionary sectors and straining household budgets. Walmart and Target CEOs privately warned that continued tariffs could cause widespread inventory shortages in coming weeks. Analysts noted that shifting imports to countries like Vietnam or India is costly and slow, limiting supply chain flexibility. Consumers may face empty store shelves for essential items, forcing them to pay premium prices or shop around. Small retailers without deep sourcing networks struggle to compete, risking business closures and local economic decline. The OECD projects U.S. GDP growth will slow sharply from 2.8% in 2024 to just 1.6% in 2025 and 1.5% in 2026, driven largely by tariffs and trade uncertainty. With inflation ticking up toward 3.9%, and economic momentum weakening, the Federal Reserve is likely to maintain interest rates to contain inflation. Slower growth could push U.S. unemployment higher, and households will face tighter credit conditions and borrowing costs. Families might see squeezed incomes and have less ability to save or spend, pushing further stress on middle-class stability.
Costco chaos, kilometres of gridlock.
It's just crazy.
As shoppers waited hours to get in the doors.
Completely impatient, like you had to hold your ground.
2.5 hours almost.
Consumer confidence just saw its biggest drop since August 2021. Intel is cutting 15,000 jobs. Costco foot traffic is down 2.3%. Spending on essentials is up 4.3%, but electronics have plunged by 6.8%. A chilling warning from Costco's earnings report. Costco's Q2 2025 earnings came with a surprise, and not the good kind. Yes, revenue rose by 4.2%, but same-store sales, the key measure of real performance, only grew 1.7%, well below the expected 3.5%. The result? A near-instant backlash from investors. But here's where it gets serious. Customer visits dropped 2.3%, the first decline in nearly 4 years. Even more worrying, renewals for executive memberships fell by 2 percentage points, now sitting at 90%. Remember, membership fees make up 75% of Costco's operating income. If loyal customers hesitate, this business model begins to wobble. Consumers are clamping down hard. What are Americans buying now? Not TVs, not new appliances, they're buying groceries, paper towels, basic goods. Essential spending is up 4.3%. Big ticket and electronic sales are down 6.8%. 58% of shoppers are buying fewer non-essentials than they did 6 months ago. 72% now consider warehouse memberships a necessity, not a luxury. This isn't just penny pinching, it's a clear shift in mindset, from comfort spending to financial defense mode. And it's happening across all income levels. Costco's value fortress is under pressure. For years, Costco's value-driven model was bulletproof. $1.50 hot dog and soda combo, $4.99 rotisserie chicken Kirkland signature products that beat national brands on both quality and price. With 850 global locations, including 591 in the US, Costco thrived on everyday low pricing and stock up and save events. But now, shoppers are buying less, even when the price is right. Smaller carts, fewer visits, less urgency to stock up. The message is clear. Even unbeatable value loses its pull when wallets are tightening. A retail crisis sweeping the nation. Costco's not alone. The retail sector is flashing red. Bed Bath & Beyond, from 1,500 stores to under 350. 45 more closing. Soon Best Buy, 3,500 layoffs. Gap Inc., 400 job cuts. Walgreens, shutting 1,200 stores over the next 3 years. And it's not just retail. Intel is slashing 15,000 jobs. Goldman Sachs is cutting 3,200 positions. Hasbro is letting go of 1,900 employees. Meanwhile, the Consumer Confidence Index just logged its third straight monthly decline, the steepest since August 2021. The Wells Fargo Housing Index fell to 35, from 51 just 6 months ago, reflecting fears of high interest rates and shrinking affordability. This isn't a slowdown. It's a broad-based economic retreat. How Americans are trying to stay financially safe. People are adjusting quickly and wisely, eliminating high-interest debt, building emergency savings, diversifying investments across safer assets. More households are moving 5 to 10% of portfolios into precious metals like gold and silver. Income-producing real estate is gaining attention, as are dividend-paying stocks with predictable cash flow. Among those responding fastest, 77% of Gen X and 81% of baby boomers plan to cut spending further in the coming months. Meanwhile, younger generations may struggle more, with fewer savings and more emotional spending habits.
We're talking about 800 horsepower and 1,250 newton meters from one e-motor.
With just one unexpected announcement, Koenigsegg nearly brings Elon Musk to his knees on live broadcast. A motor the size of a suitcase, yet more powerful than Tesla's entire system. Could this mark the end of the pure electric era? The surprise strike. Koenigsegg moves, Elon stunned on camera. In 2025, as the auto industry obsesses over battery range and smart software, Koenigsegg, a boutique automaker with just a few hundred employees, unleashed two unexpected weapons. An electric motor weighing under 40 kilograms, producing 800 horsepower, and a quad-turbo engine running on e-fuel, packing 1,500 horsepower. Clean, compact, and incredibly versatile. With a quiet update, Koenigsegg dropped a technical bomb right at the heart of the EV ecosystem. And the reaction? Almost immediately, Elon Musk appeared in an internal live-streamed meeting.